The notification arrived at 11:42 p.m., lighting up my dark bedroom like a sudden accusation. It was a text from my mother, 3 sentences that erased 30 years of devotion. We've had a family meeting. We all agree that you are toxic to our dynamic. You are no longer welcome at gatherings. There was no preamble.
No explanation.
Just a digital eviction from the family I had spent my entire adult life trying to please. A second later, my younger sister, Bella, hearted the message. That little red heart hurt more than the text itself. It was a seal of approval on my banishment. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone across the room. Instead, a strange, cold clarity washed over me. For years, I had been the silent engine keeping the family vehicle running. My father's business investments that never paid off? I covered the losses. My mother's keeping up with the Joneses' lifestyle? I funded the gap between her reality and her delusions. Bella's graduate degree? My savings account. I sat up in bed and opened my laptop. The blue light washed over my face as I logged into my banking portal. It was a spreadsheet of martyrdom. First, the auto pay for my parents' mortgage. Cancel. Next, the family cell phone plan with the unlimited data Bella used to post photos of vacations I paid for. Cancel. Then, the car insurance for my dad's truck. Cancel. The utilities, the streaming services, the emergency credit card I let them keep for groceries that they used for designer shoes. Cancel. 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 It took 14 minutes to dismantle the financial safety net I had spent a decade weaving. They thought they were cutting off a toxic daughter. They didn't realize they were cutting off their primary revenue stream. I looked around my apartment, clean, quiet, and paid for by the second job I worked on weekends while they relaxed at the lake house I maintained. I used to think my generosity was love. I used to think if I just gave enough, paid enough, fixed enough, they would finally see me as valuable. But tonight, looking at the confirmed cancellation screens, I realized I hadn't been a daughter to them. I was a subscription service, and their free trial had just expired. I closed my laptop and laid back down. The silence in the room was heavy, but for the first time in years, it didn't feel lonely. It felt like the calm before a very righteous storm. The next morning, my phone was a graveyard of missed calls. Dad.
Mom. Bella.
Even my aunt, who usually only called when she wanted to sell me essential oils. I didn't answer. I made coffee, sat by the window, and watched the city wake up, feeling a disconnect from the chaos I knew was unfolding 30 miles away. The first text came from Bella. Hey, Netflix isn't working. Did you change the password? Priorities. An hour later, a text from Dad. The electric company just sent a shut-off notice. There must be a mistake with your card. Call them ASAP. They still didn't get it. They thought these were glitches, administrative errors. It hadn't occurred to them that the toxic daughter they exiled was the only reason they had lights to read their eviction texts by. By noon, the tone shifted from confused to aggressive. Mom left a voicemail, her voice trembling with that weaponized fragility she perfected years ago. Elena, I don't know what kind of game you're playing, but this is cruel. Your father is stressed. Fix this. I listened to it twice, dissecting the manipulation. Fix this. That was my role. The fixer. The checkbook. The doormat. I finally responded to the group chat with a screenshot of their exile text from the night before, followed by a single sentence. I'm respecting your wishes to no longer be part of the family. Since I'm not family, I assume I'm no longer responsible for family bills. The explosion was immediate. My phone vibrated so hard it danced across the coffee table. They weren't angry that they hurt me. They were angry that their ATM had developed a conscience. I realized I needed professional armor. I called Marcus, an old friend from law school who specialized in estate law and high-conflict families. We met for lunch, and I laid it all out. The years of payments, the property deeds, the loans disguised as gifts. You need to lock everything down, Marcus said, scrolling through the spreadsheet of expenses I'd compiled. This isn't just petty drama, Elena. This is financial abuse. If the house deed is in your name, and you say it is, we need to move fast before they try to claim adverse possession or squatter's rights. The house is in my name, I confirmed. I bought it when Dad's credit tanked in 2018. They just pay actually, I pay the mortgage. They don't pay anything. Marcus looked up, his expression grim. Then they aren't just family. They're tenants. And tenants who don't pay rent get evicted. When private manipulation fails, toxic people turn to public destruction. That evening, I saw the notification that my mother had tagged me in a Facebook post. It was a masterpiece of revisionist history. Please pray for our family, it read. We are heartbroken that our eldest daughter has chosen money over love. After everything we sacrificed to raise her, she has abandoned us in our time of need. Pride comes before the fall. The comments were flooding in. Cousins, church members, and neighbors were piling on, calling me ungrateful, cold, and heartless. How could she, one aunt wrote, after you paid for her college? I laughed out loud in my empty apartment. They paid for college? I was still paying off my student loans while simultaneously paying off Bella's. The gaslighting was so audacious, it was almost impressive.
I didn't comment.
I didn't defend myself. I did something better. I forwarded the screenshots to Marcus. Defamation, he texted back. Add it to the pile. But then, the investigation took a darker turn. Marcus had been digging into the paperwork regarding my grandmother's estate. When she passed away 2 years ago, I was told there was no inheritance, that medical bills had eaten it all. I believed them because I trusted them. Elena, Marcus said over the phone later that night, his voice serious. I pulled the probate records. Your grandmother didn't die broke. She left a trust. And according to the distribution documents, the primary beneficiary was you. The room spun.
What?
No, Mom said. I'm looking at a withdrawal slip for $40,000, dated 3 days after the funeral. Marcus interrupted. It's signed by you. But looking at your other documents, this isn't your signature. I stared at the wall, nausea rising in my throat. They hadn't just used me for my income. They had stolen my inheritance. The kitchen renovation my mom bragged about that year? The new car Bella drove? That was Grandma's money. That was my money. The sadness I had been holding onto finally evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard rage. They wanted a war?
Fine.
I had the receipts, and now I had the evidence of a felony. I parked my car down the street, not wanting to give them a warning. The house looked warm and inviting from the outside. The porch light I paid for was on. The lawn I paid a landscaper to mow was perfectly manicured.
It was a beautiful lie.
I walked up the driveway, envelope in hand. I could hear the television blaring inside. I rang the doorbell. Bella answered, looking disheveled.
Her eyes widened when she saw me. Mom.
She's here. My mother appeared in the hallway, looking triumphant. She thought I was there to apologize. She thought I had broken. Well, she said, crossing her arms. I hope you're ready to apologize to your father. His blood pressure has been through the roof. I'm not here to apologize, I said, my voice steady. I'm here to serve you. I held out the envelope. She stared at it like it was a bomb. What is this? It's a notice to vacate, I said loud enough for my father to hear from the living room. You have 30 days to leave the premises. The utilities will be cut off in 48 hours. And Marcus is filing a fraud report regarding Grandma's trust in the morning. My mother's face went pale, the color draining so fast, she looked like a ghost. You wouldn't. We're your family. No, I corrected her. We agreed. I'm no longer part of the family. Remember? My father rushed to the door, his face red. Elena, be reasonable. Where are we supposed to go? You can't just kick your parents out on the street. You have the lake house, I said, knowing full well the lake house was currently facing foreclosure because they hadn't paid the property tax in 2 years, another bill I had stopped covering. Or maybe you can stay with Bella. I'm sure she can support you with her influencer money. Bella shrank back against the wall, silent. You forged my signature, I said, stepping closer to my mother. You stole $40,000 from a dead woman and spent it on granite countertops. That's not a mistake, Mom. That's a crime. You're lucky I'm only evicting you and not sending the police. I dropped the envelope at her feet. 30 days. Don't take the appliances. I have the receipts for those, too. I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard my mother start to scream, a primal sound of a predator realizing it had become the prey. I didn't look back. The next month was a blur of legalities and logistics. They tried to fight the eviction, claiming they had rights as tenants, but without a lease and with zero proof of rent payments, their case crumbled in minutes. The judge was unimpressed by their sob story, especially once Marcus introduced the evidence of the forged trust documents. They moved out on the 29th day. I didn't go to watch. I sent a property manager to do the final walkthrough. The report came back with photos. They had left the place a mess, scuffed walls, trash left behind, a final petty act of rebellion. But the house was empty. It was mine again. I sold the house 2 weeks later. I didn't want the memories. I took the profit, combined it with the recovered funds from the trust, which they were forced to repay by liquidating their own retirement accounts, and bought a small place in the city.
A place they didn't have the address to.
The silence that followed was different from the silence of that first night. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I heard through the grapevine, aka my Aunt Gina, who had quietly switched sides once the forgery came to light, that they were renting a small 2-bedroom apartment near the airport. Bella had to get a real job at a call center. Dad was working part-time again. They were living the life they could afford, the life they should have been living all along. One evening, about 6 months later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. It was from my dad. I opened it over the trash can. Elena, we miss you. We forgive you for what you did. We're ready to put this behind us if you are. Family is the most important thing. We forgive you. The audacity made me smile. They still thought they were the ones in the position to offer grace. They still thought I was looking for a way back in. I didn't burn the letter. I didn't tear it up. I put it in the evidence file Marcus told me to keep, just in case. I walked out onto my balcony. The city lights were shimmering below, a million little lives intersecting. I had lost a mother, a father, and a sister. But as I took a sip of my wine and looked out at a view I paid for with my own money, in a life that was finally, truly mine, I realized I hadn't lost anything. I had only gained. It has been exactly 1 year since I sent that final eviction notice. In that time, the silence that initially felt so strange has transformed into the most luxurious sound in the world. Peace. I sat across from Marcus at a coffee shop, not as a panicked client, but as a friend. We were celebrating my recent promotion, a career leap I never would have been able to take when I was drowning in my family's drama. You know, Marcus said, stirring his espresso, I heard through the grapevine that your parents tried to sue the trust again. A frivolous filing. I didn't flinch. Let me guess. The judge threw it out. With prejudice, Marcus grinned. They're out of options, Elena. And more importantly, they're out of your life. Hearing that didn't bring me joy, exactly, but it brought me relief. I learned that Bella had moved in with a boyfriend she barely knew just to escape the cramped apartment my parents were renting. My mother was still posting vague, passive-aggressive quotes on social media, playing the martyr for an audience that was slowly dwindling as people realized the truth.
They were still the same people.
They hadn't learned, they hadn't grown, and they certainly hadn't taken accountability. But the difference was their chaos was no longer my climate. I was watching the storm from a safe, warm distance, behind a glass wall they couldn't break. Later that afternoon, I drove to the cemetery to visit my grandmother. I placed a bouquet of fresh tulips on her stone, paid for with the interest from the trust fund I had rescued. I did it, Grandma, I whispered to the cold granite. I stopped the cycle. I realized then that breaking a generational curse isn't a loud, cinematic battle. It's a series of quiet, painful choices. It's choosing to be the villain in their story so you can be the hero in your own. It's realizing that unconditional love shouldn't mean unconditional tolerance of abuse. I drove home to my home. Not a place I was holding for someone else. Not a place leveraging my credit score for ungrateful tenants, but a sanctuary. Evan was there, cooking dinner. He looked up and smiled when I walked in, asking how my day was, not asking for a loan. We sat on the balcony, watching the sunset. My phone sat on the table, face up. No emergency calls. No demand letters.
No guilt trips.
Just a notification for a dinner reservation next week. I used to think that cutting them off would leave a hole in my life. I used to be terrified of the empty seats at the holiday table. But as I looked at my life now, full of friends who respect me, a partner who supports me, and a bank account that belongs to me, I realized those seats weren't empty. They were open. Open for people who actually deserved to be there. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the cool evening air. I had paid a high price for this freedom, but every single cent was worth it.